We usually think of poetry as, well, something quiet, something you read for a moment of reflection. But what if I told you it's also been one of history's most powerful weapons? Seriously. From Pablo Neruda's verses that took on a dictator in Chile to Walt Whitman's lines that helped shape a new America, poetry has always been right there in the thick of it, at the heart of some of history's most intense moments. So yeah, let's get into this. And that really brings us to the big question for today. How? How can a few lines of text, not a law, not a political speech, but a poem, have enough power to bring thousands of people out into the streets? I mean, what is it about rhythm and metaphor and just pure emotion packed into a few words that can challenge an entire government? So let's kind of reframe how we're looking at poetry today. On one side, sure, it's art, it's for appreciation, for reflection. But on the other side, it's a weapon, a tool for protest, a megaphone for resistance. And today, we're zeroing in on that second identity. Poetry as a surprisingly effective technology for making things happen. So here's our game plan. We're going to look at two incredible moments where language basically became bullets. First, during the Arab Spring, and then in South Korea during the 1980 Gwangju Uprising. And after that, we'll connect it all back to what's happening right now in the world around us. All right, let's jump into our first case study, the Arab Spring. The year is 2010. A huge wave of protests for democracy kicks off in Tunisia and just sweeps across the Middle East and North Africa. And we've all seen the images, right? The social media posts, the massive crowds chanting in the streets. But what was the source code for all that unity? What got it all started?
Well, what's so fascinating is that before the big chants, it was often poetry that was stirring people's hearts. Right at the center of the revolution in Egypt, you had a guy named Ahmed Fuad Negm, known as the poet of the people. And he did something totally radical. He wrote in the everyday, colloquial Arabic that people actually spoke on the street. His poems felt as real and immediate as a conversation.
Just listen to these lines from him. They told me to be silent, but my silence was a rock and my word was a bullet. Can you just imagine hearing that after living under a repressive regime for decades? It wasn't just a nice metaphor, it was giving people permission. It was a declaration that your voice, too, could be a weapon.
And that's really the key here. This wasn't some stuffy classical literature that only elites could understand. Its power was in how accessible it was. You could memorize a poem, you could recite it, its rhythm created this shared pulse. It took all that scattered personal anger that people were feeling and turned it into one powerful, unified song that everybody knew the words to. Okay, but get this. Here's where the story takes an even crazier turn. Over in Tunisia, where the Arab Spring actually began, the anthem of their revolution was a poem written by a guy who'd been dead for decades. How does that even happen? How does a poem just lie dormant for generations and then suddenly wake up and define an entire movement?
The poet's name was Abul Qasim Ashabi, and these are the lines from his poem, Will to Live. He wrote, "If one day the people will to live, then fate must obey, the chains must be broken." See? It's not about one specific government or one specific protest. It's a universal human truth boiled down into a form so powerful it just completely transcends time.
And this just perfectly shows a key idea here. A truly powerful poem never really dies. It's like a seed that just waits in the ground, sometimes for years, until the conditions are right, until an era comes along that needs its voice, and then it blooms. During the Arab Spring, poetry was the spark. It said the things that official news could never say, and it gave people a voice.
Okay, so let's shift gears to our second case, because sometimes poetry isn't the spark that starts the fire. Sometimes it's the last light still burning when everything else has gone dark. And that's exactly what happened in May of 1980 in Gwangju, South Korea, during a brutal military crackdown on a pro-democracy uprising. In Gwangju, the military dictatorship slammed the door shut. They imposed a complete information blackout. The city was totally cut off from the rest of the world. No one outside had any idea what was really going on. The official media was either completely silent or worse, lying. While the truth was being buried, the government's propaganda machine was working overtime. They called the citizens rioters. They completely covered up the massacre. Every single official report was pure state-controlled propaganda. In that total darkness, how could the truth possibly survive? Well, the answer was poetry. And you have to ask, why poetry? Because when you're under total censorship, you need a medium that's packed with information, but also easy to hide. A single poem could carry names, places, and the raw emotion of an event, but you could pass it on a tiny scrap of paper, or just from memory. It became the era's only newspaper, the people's secret archive. At the center of all this was a poet named Kim Ji-ha. Listen to this line. With a thirsting heart, long live democracy. You feel that, right? Here, democracy isn't some abstract idea from a textbook. It's a physical, agonizing thirst. It's a desperate cry for survival. It's almost a scream.
Now, obviously, these poems weren't being published in any official way. Students would secretly copy them by hand, or they'd print them on these flimsy sheets of paper using old mimeograph machines. And that delicate paper, it was such a contrast to the unbreakable truth of the words. These little sheets became the most powerful and the most dangerous media of their time.
And the poetry didn't just stay on the page. It evolved. Take this one line from a poem by Baek Ki-won. Leaving behind love, honor, name. That line inspired a song. It was written for the symbolic spirit wedding of two activists who were killed. And that song, Im's March for the Beloved, it grew from a personal expression of grief into a national anthem of resistance. It became a promise for an entire generation to never forget.
Okay, so what does all this mean for us, right now? These historical examples are incredibly powerful, for sure. But we live in an age of smartphones and social media. Has the role of this kind of poetry changed at all?
Well, the delivery system has definitely changed. I mean, we've gone from these long poems secretly printed on paper to short, sharp lines that become hashtags or memes or captions on a viral video. They spread around the entire world in seconds.
And you see it everywhere if you look. Poets like Clint Smith are using platforms like YouTube to talk about racial injustice. Viral song lyrics can carry a message of protest farther and faster than any political speech. So yeah, the form keeps changing, but the core job is exactly the same: to use language to challenge power and to speak up for those who have been silenced. Which brings me to my last question, and this one's for you. We've seen how poetry can work in these huge historic moments, but where is that dangerous language hiding today? I mean, what words are out there in plain sight, maybe in a song you hear or an ad or a social media post, that make you just stop for a second and question everything you thought you knew? You know, this whole journey we took today, exploring the power of poetry from the streets of Cairo to the city of Guangzhou, it all started with the ideas and the research in this book. So if you want to dive even deeper into this whole idea of how language can literally shape our world, you can find Why is Poetry Dangerous by Yang Wan Kong on Amazon. Thanks for joining me.